Hello and welcome back. Now we have lots and lots of more to do with this character. So in this video here, what we're going to do is we're going to have a look at adding more detail. So I'm going to do some sculpting. Not going to do a lot of sculpting. Just going to kind of show you basic sort of technique, and then what I'm really interested in is things like normal maps and baking, basically. So how to transfer detail from high res to low res. So let's get started. So I'm going to go to my modifier stack. Now I have a mirror modifier which I am going to remove, and I have a subdivision surface modifier which I'm going to remove. Now this is what we've actually made, which is less impressive, but so it's only like 1500 verts, which is not bad because it includes a hand. And what we're going to do now is add a multi-resolution modifier and subdivide it up. So up to 4. So now we've got 382,000. Now when I mirror that, obviously we'll double what we have, so we're up at 760, which is not, an enormous amount. If I subdivide one more time, so I'm going to remove my mirror modifier. If I subdivide one more time, I'll be 1.5 million. So that's about as high as I'll go with this guy, as I'm recording video at the same time. So this is our character, and we're going to go into, and I realize his mesh is called plane, so we'll call this body. And yeah, his data block is called body as well. Okay, cool. No, it's not. Here we go, body. So we're going to go in and do a bit of sculpting. And when we get to sculpt mode, we can add a lot more detail. So I'm going to go to clay strips, and we have to be careful here. If you sculpt, if you're not used to sculpting, you can get very strange results. Like if I increase the strength here and I sculpt, I kind of cut here, I'll notice that if you turn, it's possible to get very sort of undesirable results. So be careful of the strength of your brush. You're better off with lots of small motions than one very large one. So we'll start at the top. So we will give this guy a seam at the top of his jacket here. So F, bring that down, and if I just left click and draw, I'll get I can change what I've got. If I hold down the control key, oops, turn on screencast, I can invert that. So instead of making something, let's go into solid mode here. So I can make something that's like cutting rather than something that's adding. And we're going to just highlight the seam here. Now initially this is going to be quite crude, and that's fine. You can go back and smooth it all off, and what we're trying to do is kind of increase the believability, the verisimilitude of this character. So what we want is the idea that there are creases where one surface sort of interacts with the other. Now this is quite ugly what I'm doing, but we can very simply hold down the shift key here, and you can see the tool will change, and I can change to my smooth and where once we had very ugly things, we can have basically just a hint of them and try and get a bit more kind of believability to what we're doing. So we want there to be sort of a flow to the coat. Now Blender doesn't know that the coat ends in one place and doesn't stop moving. So if we paint too close to, for example, trousers, it will just sculpt them too. But that's okay for what we're doing now. going to smooth this off. We don't want too many sort of crazy details. We just want to give it a sense of kind of motion, of movement, and that it's not just one sort of symmetrical tight mesh. And we'll do sort of the same here with our elbow. We'll try and kind of add in kind of our ubiquitous sort of elbow creases in the cloth, and then we'll sort of smooth over them. And try and get a sense of where material might fall. Now, there's a couple of quite cool tools built into this for us. There's a very nice grab tool. Again, we have to be careful kind of using it, but you can kind of pull the sleeve down a little bit, as if we're sort of falling under the weight of gravity. Now, we want to do that too much because it's going to be animated, so we may find that the arm is turned, in which case gravity might be trying to pull it down a different way. Now again, we can get into do a lot of sculpting on kind of hands and building up sort of knuckles and all sorts of but we want to remember at the core of what we're doing, this character is quite kind of toony. So we're not looking for some level of photorealism. We're just trying to make him look a bit more interesting. To get some of this these kind of straight lines that are look very unnaturalistic and unreal. So I was going to give a few more, so he looks a bit more creased and crinkled, like a person. And now there's loads we should do at this, but I'm not going to do a huge amount here. So what I'm mostly interested in, as I said, is trying to get a sense of to have a look at some of this detail. Smooth that off a bit. And that is not great, but anyway, we shall move on and again try and give that Okay, so again, just to give it sort of a slight kind of flow, and where there would be kind of creases, from the sort of the natural sort of movement of the body, that we would add in sort of a bit of detail in those areas. Okay, now we haven't given him a belt. There's loads of stuff we haven't done. Now let's do a little bit more up here. I'm going to add in buttons onto this later. So this one, give sort of a slightly lifted area where the buttons are. And now we can do all sorts of really nice things when we start texturing, and we'll have a look at them in a second. So one of the things that is really nice to do in Blender is to put in let's see if we can get an example here. So to use brushes, to use kind of textures to stroke. So it's going to get a texture here. So I'm actually on my other screen here saving a texture. So I was going to put this on my desktop and that one. Okay, so images you can't see. And okay, so what I'm going to do here on the coat is I'm going to I want to put a texture in here, so I'm going to go to the texture tab, and you can see it says brush. So I'm going to go new, and I'm going to say coat. And in here I'm going to go open, and you can see these two here. So this one is going to be my coat, and sort of a pattern. And then when I go over here and press F, you can see that that pattern is now scale is can be our friend and our enemy here. So you can see I've gone on to, now when I zoom in, the scale of this will decrease. And what I'm trying to do is sort of just brush this on. I'll smooth out the trousers in a minute. Now there's ways to mask. Actually, let's mask these trousers and smooth them out and mask them. Show you how that works. So, oops. So I'm just smoothing now. I'm not going to use to get rid of the texture on the trousers because I don't want that. And I'm going to go over here and I'm going to pick. Where's my mask? There's my mask. So I'm just going to draw onto the trousers here, and when I draw on these, this kind of spray paint I'm putting on is what I'm basically saying to Blender is when I draw with the mask, or when I draw with the texture after this, don't put it on any of the area that's black. Now I'm going to go back to my texture. Now when I go, I should go back here and let's spray paint what will be my shirt. so that my texture, my sculpted texture doesn't go on this bit. Now if it did a bit, it wouldn't be the end of the world. We're not in. Now I held down the control key there and I inverted that. So now I'm going to go back to my clay strips and my so now you can see that even though I'm brushing sort of over the edge of the jacket, that it doesn't affect. Now what I would suggest is you're going to get, there's an interesting effect. One of the more interesting parts of it is understanding how the texture relates to the geometry. So the amount of detail that I'm able to put onto this model is, directly proportional to the amount of geometry. So if there isn't a lot of geometry underneath where I'm drawing, it's not going to take these little bumps and lumps because there aren't any verts for it to move up and down. So if you have this is going to be, the texture will be different than the color. So if you have a very small amount of geometry, so if you've got, we've got 1.5 million verts here. If you're working at a lower resolution, you may find that trying to paint on something like this is not as effective. So there's that sort of texture onto the coat. Now I'm gonna go back to my mask and let's see if there's a handy invert tool here. It's grease pencil. So stroke, symmetry, lock history. No. Okay. Oh, maybe here. Invert mask. Thank you. So now I'm gonna swap out this and bring in another brush. I'm going to new, and we'll call this one shirt. And in here we'll hit open, and we'll select this texture. I'm going to put this one onto the shirt. Oh, hang on. I have not done that correctly. So let's go back to clay strips, swap that out for shirt, press F. Oh, that's too strong. And I'll bring that down there. Okay. So I'm going to go out of sculpt mode to object mode, and I am going to save this, and we'll call it detail and sculpt. Okay, and the name gets longer, and we can go back in here. Now I've got my multi-res, I can go and add in my mirror. Now that'll, make sure your computer can do that. Now, as I look at him, I realize I've done nothing to his foot. So his feet still look like clown shoes, but, we'll survive for now. I meant to actually do some sculpting on the shoes because they do need it, but we can come back to that. So here is our model. Now what we want to do is, trying to manipulate 3 million verts, in an animation is not terribly, if you're good enough machine, it'll do it. But if you were making something that was very long, you're going to have huge render times, etc. So that's going to be relatively impossible to animate this. If we look at it in wireframe mode, the vertices are just too close together to get like smooth animation. You'll get kind of harsh creases, and it is possible, but it's quite difficult. So animating a lower resolution model will give you a smoother animation and more desirable results. So, but if we go to a lower resolution model, then we'll have less detail and, you know, chicken and egg. So what we're going to do is try and create what's called a normal map. So we're going to try and bake this detail across. So the first thing we want to do is unwrap this character. Now, if we had applied our multi-resolution modifier, we'd be in trouble because we'd be unwrapping millions of Earths, and we don't want to do that. So we're going to go into edit mode. I think I hit that twice. Yeah, I did. So into edit mode and select it all and hit U and unwrap, and we'll get a mess. And here is our mess. So not good. So what we need to do before we start unwrapping is we need to add seams. We need to cut this up. So let's do that. So let's logically, we want the shirt area. So kind of let's see. So there's one or two messy seams here. So there and there and there. So we want that. And if I zoom out and go up here, and this area here, I want that to be separated from the rest of the suit. So I'm going to go Control E and go mark seam. I'm going to do the same here at the collar. Control E, mark seam. I'm going to try and right click here, mark seam, and that's gone all the way down and cut the foot and everything in half. So first thing, we do want that seam, but we don't want it to cut the hand or the foot. So I'm going to go into wireframe mode and press C for a circle select, and I'm going to get rid of one or two of these, get rid of that guy. Now one of the nice things here is we still have our mirror modifier, and that mirror modifier means that the model, we're only having to unwrap half of it. So I'm going to select that there, and then I don't want to cut the shoe in half that way, so I can go C and deselect this stuff. So I'll just make that a seam, Control E, mark seam, and I want to cut the sole off the shoe if I can. So I'll do that. Whoops, that. So Control E, mark seam, maybe cut out the where is it? There, where the ankle sort of meets the shoe. Mark seam, and then we can cut that in half. But again, we don't want the rest of it. So C, and then hold down the middle mouse button and kind of invert the selection. And I don't need to do that with the trousers or at the back. And C, but we'll cut the shoe in half that way. Apart from on the sole, so we leave that as one piece. So Control E, mark seam. So that'll be good, and we just need to have a look at this hand, how we're going to cut the hand in half. And what we should probably do is, not that, is cut the hand along a seam that, well, first of all we want to be able to control it. So we do need to make a seam in the hand, because if we don't, it'll be when it unwraps, it'll unwrap in a bizarre way. Blender won't know what to make of the shape, and what it will produce from an automated unwrap will be quite unusable. So now just need to get these seams to all join together and to there, and we'll do that. And go Control E, mark seam, and yeah, I think I need to extend this here to meet the other seam. Comes that. So Control E, mark seam. So now I'm going to try and unwrap this. Now, if I've made a mistake or if it's not right, we'll find out pretty quick. So I'm going to select it all, U, unwrap. Now, what have we got here? So keep in mind we're only doing half the body, so we'll have one of everything. So this is half a shoe. This is the hand. We can see this is the upper half of the hand because that's where the nail is. And this is the lower half of the hand, so that's unwrapped well. This is the sole of the shoe. This is, I think this is his ankle. This is the cuff of his coat. This is the other half of his shoe. And this is the entire body. We didn't cut that in half, so I need to do that. And then this is the collar of the coat. So there's one seam missing, which will make a big difference to how it unwraps. And that seam is here. Now, how do I know that seam is missing? Well, experience. And this gives us a much better result. Now, this is not perfect, but yeah, it's not bad. So, what are we looking at? We're looking at this is the coat. This is the sleeve of the coat. These are the trouser legs, collar, hands, cuff, I think, of coat. No, ankle, shoe, base of shoe, cuff of coat, shoe. So that's fine. So let's save that. So file save. And we are going to create a normal map on that. Now, I'm going to hit new here, and the image I'm going to create, I'm going to make it nice and big, so I've got lots of detail in it. So I'm going to go 4096, because computers like or graphics cards like numbers to the power of 2, so 4096, and we're going to call this normal map. And I've got cap lock on, so let's do that again. So normal map, and we'll make the color of it, we'll just pull this up a bit and we'll make it kind of a bluey color. Now the color of it's irrelevant, but there we go. So that is my normal map. Now it does nothing at the moment, it's just a picture, just a blue image. If we were to use it in any way, what we would get is it would just turn the image blue. So I'm going to go into object mode, and we're going to basically get all of our details going to appear back here. It's going to get very dense, and we'll go Z so we can see it all. I'm going to leave this open so you can see the normal map being made. So what I'm going to do in my, now keep in mind I have multiple materials, but for what I'm doing now it doesn't really matter. So I'm going to go texture and image texture, and I'm going to select my normal map. Now just notice I'm not connecting these, this is just active. It's not it shouldn't be connected. If it's connected, I'll get an error saying I've got a loop. So I'm trying to make a normal map from itself, and I don't want to do that. So I just need to have it selected, and I need the character selected. And then over here, I'm going to go down to, at the bottom of the render window, I'm going to go to my bake settings. Now I'm going to go to my GPU compute because it's going to be quicker. And again, it's going to save before we go into this process because sometimes it can crash. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask it to take all of this high resolution information, all this sculpted information, make a normal map out of it, which is like a bump map. So I'm going to say normal, and I'm just going to hit bake here, and it's going to give me a percentage to be completed, and we'll just wait because the map is quite big and it's quite a detailed mesh in terms of it's got 3 million verts in it, so we'll give it a chance to bake. And what's it actually doing right now? Well, every face has a normal, and the normal basically is perpendicular to the face, so it shows what direction the face is facing or is pointing. Million and 63,000 faces on this high resolution model, and when we shine light on this model, it determines all of the shadowing and all of the all of the information pertaining to the faces. It will save it into this normal map, so then we can use this to put the detail onto a lower resolution image. So that is not very good. So let's actually, we only made these as a guide, so I'm going to actually peel back on these. We shouldn't really have 3 materials for this, so I was going to remove my materials. 1, 2. My machine is slowly creaking, and we'll remove that one. Now they were just for reference when we were kind of coloring things in. So we've got skin here. We'll rename this body. Now, and over here, again, we'll add in our texture, our normal map, which it didn't turn out terribly well that time. And we'll go back to our bake settings. We want to bake, and we want to bake normals. Now you can see I have a whole bunch of other maps I can bake here, and so I'm going to hit bake now. And so what I did that time was I just did some of the information. So we want the whole thing to be baked across, so that we can see what it looks like. So I'm just going to pause the video and then start it again when it's done. Okay, so here we come back to, that actually took quite a while, and the results here are far more interesting. Now, a couple of things about Blender. This little star says image, and it's got a little star beside it, and up here it says Blender, it's got a little star. It's very, very hard to see, tiny little asterisks. When you see that little asterisk, it means it's not saved. Now, if I go File, Save, the asterisk has disappeared up here, but is still present here. So this image is not saved when you save your blend file, only the mesh information, or if you've packed the file, an image will be packed in. But the image itself here, this information is not saved. So I need to go Save as Image, and I'm going to put it on my desktop, what's called Normal Map, and Save. And now that little asterisk has disappeared, and that's really important, because if you don't do that, if you quit out of this program, that information's gone. Now, here's what I'm going to do. I am going to go over here to my multi-resolution modifier and basically turn it off. So we're back to where we started. This is no longer has any effect on my character. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this normal data here to try and put the detail back on. So let's start by saying we don't want the color information. We want the non-color information. And we don't want to attach this in here. If we do, we'll get that. It'll just give us, weird colors. No extra sort of information about geometry. So what we need to do is we need to put in a normal map, which I think is under vector, is it? Yeah, normal map. So we need to say this is the information about the normal map, and these are my normals. And what we have now, well, let me just change this back to white. So we'll just set this to be 111. And what we've got here is all of the textured and painted in, textures that we've put on are being applied. So now if I say apply back my subdivision surface modifier, I have a character that has 11,000 verts, and pretty much all of the detail that we sculpted in from the character that had 3 million verts. But this one will be much easier to animate. Now I can come in and do all sorts of other additional coloring, etc. to this. So let's just turn this off. Let's just get rid of it. And so that's it without the normal map. And then this is it with the normal map. And what we can also do is, let's put this up to 2. What we can also do is we can set the strength of it. So we have literally a strength slider, so I can make it horribly deformed, or I can bring it back and make it more subtle if I want, so that the pattern is just slightly visible. The default is 1, and where you want it to sit is up to you. And if I were to take this model, and this is, I suppose, is the ultimate test. If I go Shift D and hit escape and go GX, and from this model here I'm going to create a new material, and I'm going to call this material plain or blank. And I'm going to delete the normal map and the image texture. And on this one I'm going to delete the subsurface modifier and turn these on. And it's taking its time because I've just added 3 million verts to the scene. Now, so that's the sculpted model. This one here, just to illustrate my point, I'm going to delete the multi-res modifier, so all I'm left with is the mirror and the subsurface, but it has the normal map. So I'm going to look through my camera and select my camera here and go G. I think actually I know what I did in a previous tutorial. I hid that, so I was going to go G, place that there, and I'm going to render this now. I'm not quite sure how long this will take to render because I do have 3 million verts. Whoops, I did not mean to make a new window. I meant to close that one. So I'm going to go File Save, and then I'm going to press Render. And I may pause the video here to because this may take a bit of time. We'll see. Yeah, I'm going to pause this and we'll see how long it takes. So here's our rendered result. It actually didn't take that long in the end. It took about 1 minute 10 seconds. I had to actually render it twice. I had to reset the lamp properties. Now this image here on the right has 3 million verts, or this object here on the right, and then this one here on the left has about 50,000 with the subsurface modifier on it. And they are, this one is definitely not as detailed as this. This is a more attractive looking mesh, but for it's not 2.95 million verts more attractive than this one. So you can see it's adding in the normal map is a really good way to get extra detail in without having to use all these verts. And as I said before, the other side of that is it's almost impossible to animate something this complex. So we're nearly finished. I just want to go back here and show you. So just let me get out of rendered mode here. I'll go textured mode. I'm going to delete the very high res model that we have. It's this one here. Once it's selected, and things should speed up once I've done that. Okay. And we'll center the camera on this guy. Now, I'm not worried that it's blue. So let us not be worried about the blueness. We can fix all that. What I am going to do though is just kind of show you what can be done now. So I can disconnect that and we'll just go to material mode, so he's white. Now, and there's a whole bunch of other things we can bake, not just normal maps. So ambient occlusion, for example, is if we turn into rendered mode here. So ambient occlusion is sort of the addition of ambient light into the scene. We can bake an ambient occlusion map in the same way that we can bake a normal map. Now, when we do this, we're going to bake over the normal map. So this is what's selected. It has the normal map. Now I could make a new one, but I'm not going to bother because I'm just going to save it out as a map. So I'm going to go to my bake settings here, and instead of selecting normal, I'm going to select ambient occlusion and hit bake. And because this is our selected map, it should bake across. And as that bakes there, we have a whole bunch of other maps that we can bake. So we can bake our bake out shadows, which we'll do, and then we'll have three maps. Then we'll have a normal map, a shadow map, an ambient occlusion map. We'll also end up with a color map, like so to color things in, so a diffuse map. So it'll be interesting to then combine. In our next video we'll combine all four maps in this here, rather than trying to fit too much into this tutorial. So I'm just going to pause this and let it finish the render. So this is our ambient occlusion map. So you can see it's just sort of added in kind of shadows kind of in between the fingers, in the kind of shadowy areas in the image. What we should do actually now for the next one, for our shadow map, is when we add that in there, and we get our oh, that's added the shadow map in. We don't want that. We want so I've saved this map here, so I want to open normal map. So you can see here I've got AO map that I saved. So that should be going through this guy. And non-color data. There we go. So that's not right. What have I done here? So there we go. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add another texture here. I'm going to make a shadow map here, and I'm going to go plus, and we'll call this shadow map. So we'll leave that there, and we'll load it in. So shadow map, and again we haven't connected it. This is where it's going to, the information is going to go to, and we are going to, we'll just go into solid mode here, and we will go shadow map and bake. So our character is and so the reason I've connected this is so if normal maps are going to cast any shadows. We'll get them on this image as well. So I'm going to hit bake. And again, if it's going to take any length of time, I'll pause it for the purposes of the tutorial. And it appears it will. 1%, yeah. So I'll pause this and then you'll see the finished product. So that took an extraordinary long time to do. The shadow map is completely dependent on the positioning of the light. So the information that we're going to get from it will be sort of specific to the position of this light in this world. So while it can be very useful, it can also be not as useful in terms of its application if you want to move the character through a different scene. So we were 46 minutes in, so we've done quite a bit here. And so I'm going to hold up or stop up now, and then in the next tutorial I'll show you how to connect all these nodes together and make it all work. So that's it for now.